Welcome to the Just Transition Conference. You all made it. Congratulations. You made it through the office part. So my name is Erin, for those of you that don't know me, and I'm lucky enough to work at the Clean Air Coalition. So I'm going to do a couple quick thank yous, and then we're going to dive right into the day. So the first thank you I want to do is to NYSET, New York State United Teachers, for hosting us today. Where's Sarah? Thank you so much. And all of our sponsors. Somewhat hysterically, I think we have a makeup company that is sponsoring this conference, Lush Cosmetics, so thanks to Lush, to the Lexington Co-op, the Working Families Party, Riverside Salem Church, and City Councilman Joe Golombek. So let's just give them a round of applause. Thank you. So a couple logistical things. Bathrooms, everyone find them? They're outside. There's lots of them. And the folks with clean air shirts are here to help you, and lots of other volunteers are here as well if you have any confusion. And just be sure to check out the book sales. Les Leopold's books are on sale, and we're lucky enough that Burning Books is here too to share some movement building books with us as well. So, does everybody find their little sign in their bag? You have a sign in your bag. If you could find it for me, just bear with me here. Okay. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about myself, but before I go there, I want to get a sense of who's in the room. So I'd like you to raise your, I don't know what we're calling these. What are these called? Raise your sign if you live in the town of Tonawanda, or any of the Tonawandas. Cool, okay. Raise your hand if you live in that county, if you live in Erie County. Yeah, good. Raise your hand if you're from outside Erie County. Okay, we got a couple outsiders. This is good. Raise up your flag if you're a union member. Awesome. I'm not. I need a union. That's right. You gotta fight for me. I want you to raise up your thing if you're a teacher. Awesome. Raise up your sign if you're a climate change activist. Cool. Raise up your sign if you are a clean air member. Awesome. So we have all the best people here today. We've got union members, we've got a ton of folks that live in the county, a ton of folks that live in the town, folks that are from the union, that are not from union, people that care deeply about climate change. And so I wanted to get a sense of who you are. I want to tell you just a little bit about me and why I come to this work, and about our organization, and why and how we all ended up in this room together today. So about 5 years ago, I made a choice to become part of this organization that I now love very, very much. And I made a choice to stay put in Tonawanda, which was the town that my grandfather chose to settle his family in. He chose Tonawanda. My grandfather raised my dad and all my aunts on Cornwall in the town of Tonawanda. Though he never spent much time on the street, he was always in the basement. My grandpa was a civil rights attorney, and he represented political prisoners in Northern Ireland. And he also fought companies in Northern Ireland that were discriminating against Catholics and perpetuating poverty there. And so some of you that know me really well know that on my living room wall I have a sign that says, "I shall never give up." If I were an American, this is an Irishman speaking, I would never give up my arms. Never, 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 never. And I've been told I have a lot of my grandfather's stubbornness, and also a lot of, you all know me. So I staged my first protest at the age of 6 against my father. He was the lead negotiator for his union. He was a trained negotiator. And so I learned from a very young age that when someone does something to you that screws you over, you don't pitch a hissy fit, you organize. And so my dad did something that made me really mad. I can't remember what it was. But instead of throwing a temper tantrum, I marched my brother and my sister to the playroom and busted out the glitter and the poster board and the markers, and we made signs that said, "Dad is unfair." And when he walked in the door at 6:15, like he did every single day, my brother and sister dutifully were marching up and down the stairs saying, "Dad is unfair, Dad is unfair." And my mother didn't speak to him that night, and I knew I had won my first victory. I love this place. And so about five years ago, I came home. I was going to be leaving for Rhode Island. And I had a job there. I had a job there organizing. And I heard about this ragtag group of people that were fighting this big plant that was making them all very sick. And Charlie, who's hiding in the corner, called and said, "We heard you know a little bit about organizing." I'm like, "Well, yeah, a little bit. I just got out of college, sure." And Charlie convinced me to come to an interview and meet some of the folks in Tonawanda that were fighting this big plant, and some of them are in the room today. And I fell in love with them. This was this incredible group of people that were very sick from the emissions from the plant, and really had no reason to believe that they were going to beat Tonawanda Coke. No reason to believe that. But they believed they were, and they convinced me. And so I was supposed to leave town that Friday, and I never left. I stayed home, and I lived in my parents' basement for a month, and I started work at the Clean Air Coalition that Monday. And that was the best choice I have ever made. Now I am part of this community, and it's a little bit of an interesting one we've got here today. I don't think this group of people comes together a whole lot. And so some of you are here because you believe climate change is the most pressing issue of the century, right? This is the thing we've got to deal with. Some of you are here because you really are worried about your kids' education if the plant were to close. Some of you are here because you want to make sure that you can continue to sustain your family because you work at the plant and the plant may close. Maybe you're here because you're deeply connected and reconnecting us to the waterfront. Maybe some of you are here because you're sick from the pollution from the plants in the town of Tonawanda. And some of you are here because you want to make sure the streets can just still get plowed in the town of Tonawanda. And that's okay too, if the plant were to retire. And so what motivates us might be really, really different, but what we share are common values. We deeply love this community, the town and the county. We know that it deserves investment, and if there's one thing people in Erie County know, we believe in comebacks. And one thing everyone in this room did is get their butt out of bed on a Saturday morning, and they decided to come here. And maybe you had a moment of like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. When I woke up at 7, I was like really not excited. So maybe you had a moment where you weren't sure, but you made it. You made it, and you're here. And you're here because our community is faced with a choice. We know that the Huntley plant in the town of Tonawanda is losing money. It's not in a strong financial place. And if we don't act to figure out what's going to happen, we know what could happen. This town, this region knows what happens. Our community, we've already lived this once. If we don't come together and hammer out a plan, we all get screwed. We know what happens when Bethlehem Steel closed. Thousands of people lost their jobs. There was no jobs plan. Families broke up. The government had to come to a standstill. The county lost tons of money. The town government collapsed. And there was a big old brownfield there where the steel mills were for years, for decades. And we're living this again. The ConAgra plant in Chautauqua County just closed last week, and there was a huge rally. 400 people lost their jobs because the plant decided to shut down overnight. And the workers are scrambling, and the county's scrambling to figure that out. And so we know what happens if we don't act. If we do act, we could come together to come up with a really good plan. We could have a region that generates wealth for working people. We could have an economy that's actually owned by our people. We could have an economy that doesn't poison workers and community members. We could grow an economy that would grow and not shrink Tonawanda's public schools. We could have a waterfront with boats and birds and beer. And we could help mitigate climate change. We could do all of that. Yeah, Michael? And so, that's that kind of hope. I think that's why you're in the room today, right? Because you have some hope that we could create something pretty powerful together. My grandfather did it. This group has done it when we tackled Tonawanda Coke, and I think we can do it again. And so we're not sure what the future is going to bring. We're going to try to get some clarity on that today, but we don't know. But we've got to begin to build this stuff together. And it's not easy, but I wanted to offer a quote, who many of you know. I've been talking about Tony Mazzocchi a lot at all of our meetings. And I think today we're trying to do what Tony challenged the environmental movement and the labor movement to do a long time ago. But the challenge is still very real. And part of the quote is up behind you guys. But Tony said, we need to hammer out, we think we've got the formula to hammer out, a transition where people are not sacrificed, where people will be able to be compensated fully in any transition if their jobs are lost. We can't just give it lip service. If there's to be a real alliance around our shared concerns, the cornerstone has to be a just transition, a transformation, moving from the type of society that does harm to a great many people to a society that does harm to no one, and a society that's free of want. But it cannot be rhetorical. It's got to be practical, it's got to be tangible and understandable and coherent, and we've got to hammer out that program together. And that's what we're here to do. So glad you guys are here. I think the crowd's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger as the day goes on.
Could you have Tony stand up, please?
Tony's not with us any longer.
Why not?
He's passed.
Past where?
He's dead, yes. He passed away in 2002. But there are some folks in the room that worked very closely with Tony. Would you guys want to give a wave or stand up? If you knew Tony?
Less than I book.
That's it. So I'm going to, if you want to follow up, they're going to be here all day, and that's part of the reason they're here. And so we've got a great lineup. Y'all have the official program. You have the agenda in your programs. But we're going to learn today from thinking and learning more about how the coal markets are doing and trends nationally and how the coal plant's doing here, to thinking about why there are no jobs and seemingly no money for workers or environmental protection, to thinking about job creation and renewables, to learning from folks who are dealing with these challenges in other parts of the country. We're not alone in this. That's the good thing. So I'm so happy you're here. I'm thrilled to be here and that this today actually happened. And so I'm going to kick off our first panel now. So I'd love, so we're going to start the coal panel, and I want to quickly introduce David and Kathy, who are just two amazing human beings. David is the director. So David and Kathy were the co-authors of the report that was released in January showing that the coal plant is in trouble. So David is the Director of Resource Planning at the Institute for Energy, Economics, and Financial Analysis, and the President of Schlissel Technical Consulting. So since 1973, he has served as a consultant, expert witness, and attorney on engineering and economic issues in the fields of energy and the environment. His recent work has focused in large part on the evaluation of utility resource plans, assessment of the need for and the likely environmental and economic benefits from proposed fossil-fired power plants, and analysis of the economic, environmental, and reliability impacts of retiring operating power plants. He's done lots of other things too, but I'm not going to read all of them. And then Kathy is an independent consultant with Kunkel Energy Research, and she's also with the Institute for Energy, Economics, and Financial Analysis. She's based in Fayetteville, West Virginia, and she's testified in several cases before the West Virginia Public Service Commission on energy efficiency and resource planning. So I'd like to welcome David. So let's give him a warm welcome.
Before I get going, I have to make two comments. One is Erin is definitely a hard act to follow. I was a little older when I started my first organizing. The other is I want to apologize. I realize I may offend some in the crowd by wearing my New York Giants cap, if you're old enough to remember the 1990 Super Bowl. Actually, folks out here probably remember a number of Super Bowls in a row, but I won't touch those. What we're going to talk about, Kathy and I are going to talk about, is the uncertainty regarding the future of coal plants in general. That's my piece. And then the Huntley plant in specific. That's Kathy's. Rather than hold questions to the end, if you have questions, you disagree with something, please raise your hand or raise your stop. It's better having that interactive process, I feel. So let me get started. Zinhut. Before the late 1990s, utilities were vertically integrated. What that means is that Niagara Mohawk Power Corporation, which provided energy out here, electricity out here, owned the generating plants, the transmission lines, and the distribution system. The rates were regulated by the State Public Service Commission. I worked for the I worked for the State Consumer Protection Board from 1975 to 1983, and came out here and did a number of rate hearings in cases out here during that time. As the 90s got going, people were upset. Some of the large new nuclear plants that were built in the state led to what was called rate shock. Rates went up dramatically. And people wanted deregulation. They thought things couldn't be worse if you let the free market do its thing than what the PSC was doing. Now, whether it's debatable or not, and it's certainly, you can argue either side, in terms of coal plants, free markets are deadly, as I will get into. So the markets were what they called restructured. Now there are competitive wholesale markets. A company like NRG sells the output from Huntley into the deregulated energy market, and whatever the price of power is, that's what they get for the energy. There's also a capacity market. With power plants, you're concerned with two things mainly. One is capacity. How much power does it put out at any one time? That's generally megawatts. And then you're also concerned with how much energy does it produce. That's power over time, so it's megawatt hours. As a result of the deregulation, many power plants were sold from the regulated utilities to merchant companies. This is a map of the United States, and it's got up here there are 10 independent system operators. What they did when they deregulated was, in the various portions of the country that deregulated, they set up independent system operators to monitor and to administer these wholesale markets. The areas that don't have any of these, I'll describe the colors in it. The New York one here is New York ISO. In the South, Southern Company and Duke Energy were powerful enough that they liked regulation. They love regulation. They have no competition and they make a huge amount of money. So in the South, there's some independent power producers, but generally it's very similar to what it was 70 years ago. Out west, generally, let's see, Arizona had deregulated, and then the utility decided they weren't happy, they weren't making enough money, so they re-regulated. That's about it in terms of the deregulation. This is an independent system operator like New York ISO. MISO is another one. PJM is the largest in terms of how many power plants and capacity. And then ISO New England. And I live in Boston now, so that's where I live. And then there are a couple in Canada. So again, the key, yes?
Is this a federal initiative?
It came out of a series of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission orders requiring that there be equal access to the transmission system, and those legal decisions fed the political battle over regulation versus non. Yeah?
It's important to remember there's a guy named Ken Lay, and he was very instrumental in setting up these ISO.
Yeah, I don't want to get into Enron.
But
That's like way far.
He set it up so that it's capable of being milked for enormous amounts of fraud if it's under certain conditions.
Absolutely. There are severe problems with the competitive markets, but from the point of coal, it increases the risk on a coal plant owner dramatically. Okay, so now we have competitive markets for both capacity, megawatts, and energy, megawatt hours. Power plants these days, and I'm talking generally around the country, are owned by three types of entities. There are still some regulated utilities in these white states. They own power plants just as if deregulation, restructuring never happened. There are merchant companies like NRG, they own the power plants. And then there's public power. I've met my old buddy Bill Nowak in the back there, back in the 70s, organizing for public power in New York State. While public power has many benefits, including some democracy somewhere, there are problems with public power. They are absolutely going to be the last ones to give up coal. To them, it's a religion, and they're religious extremists about coal, unfortunately. Not all, of course. I'm not trying to generalize too far. The risk, how much risk the owner bears depends on whether it's a merchant, where they're completely at risk in the market. versus a regulated utility which really doesn't have much risk at all because they can pass on the cost to consumers. Of course, if the PSC doesn't pass along all costs, they have some risk. Public power, the board votes to raise the rates. And we've seen that a lot in our work around the country. And I should talk about the Institute. I've been doing this work for 40 years. 3 years ago, actually about 6 years ago, I met a group of people who were doing similar work to what I was doing around the country. And over time, we started working closely together. And now we have the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis, IEEFA. I was executive director for a little while, and then mercifully they put me out to pasture to do what I like to do. But while I was executive director, I wanted to pick the most boring name that nobody could ever use to challenge us, like, Beyond Coal or something like that. I didn't want anything like that. I wanted something that they couldn't use against us, and I succeeded. I have a name that nobody remembers. You can't. I've been told you can't even use it on Twitter because it's too long. I've never done it.
What is it?
Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis. A lot of work. It does describe what we do. You see in the bottom left-hand corner there. There's 6 or 7 of us. We're a virtual organization in that we're spread around the country. I'm in Boston. Kathy's outside Charleston, West Virginia. We have someone who works with us who lives on the southern rim of the Grand Canyon. Somebody in Kingston, New York. Somebody in New York City in our main office with our executive director and office manager located in Cleveland. And we get together 5-6 times a year. But it works fine. Right now we're working all around the country on various projects related to coal and fossil fuels, trying to wean the U.S. off them and push them in a direction of energy efficiency and renewables, a greener future. The New York ISO is divided into a series of zones with letters. These are different capacity and energy markets, is the way to think of it. They're defined by transmission links between the zones. We're here in Zone A, as are Dunkirk and Huntley. I grew up down here on Zone K, but unfortunately the island I grew up on, Long Beach, they don't seem to care enough about to put on the map. The city is J, Mid-Hudson is Westchester County, or H and I. It's very difficult to get any power from here all the way down to there. I did a study once, and by the transmission links, it's not as if you can generate power at Huntley or Dunkirk here and be assured of selling it at a really good price down here. Just think of a series of transmission gates going down, going first west to east, and then once it gets to the Capital District, heading down south. I'm going to be commenting, from now on I'm going to talk about Zone A in New York. And that means this region of the state. Any questions? Okay. What are the risks of investing in coal? There are a lot of risks of investing in coal. I've put 4 in red because I think that generally, looking at this again, my view is of the country, that the 4 biggest risks are low natural gas prices, flat or slow sales growth, increased use of renewable resources, wind and solar mainly, and low capacity market prices. Also, there's concern about the need for environmental upgrades, increasing coal prices. Someday there'll be a system of CO2 regulation. Obama's proposed regulations are certainly a step in the right direction. And as with many of us, the nation's coal plants are aging. Now, the coal industry talks about Obama and environmentalists' war on coal. Okay? What's killing coal plants, basically, not for all of them, has been, well, there has been local organizing and national organizing, but it's low gas prices. Gas is a direct competitor to coal. Now, I'm not going to touch the issue of fracking, but the reality is that low gas prices have really put the hurt on coal. As did the Great Recession, yes.
Now, the gas industry has lost about $160 billion in the last 5 years because a lot of fracking wells were selling gas below the cost that it took to make it. How long do you think they're going to continue to bleed that money?
I'll hold that for a while.
Okay.
I mean, it's not like they've called me and told me what they're going to do.
That's always good.
Although I do talk to some of them who don't like that fracking's done by all these independents and realize they could make more money if it were done in a rational way. Natural gas prices collapsed in 2008. I don't know whether it was the discovery of shale gas. More likely, they admitted that it was there. The low gas prices have led to low energy market prices, again in the competitive markets, which mean less revenue to a coal plant owner like NRG that's selling its power in the market. It's also led to increased generation at gas plants and lower generation at coal plants. As a result, and as I'll show, coal plant owners have seen their profits fall off a cliff. This is many things. Couldn't happen to a nicer bunch. Here we go. This is a slide. The dashed line are the annual average natural gas prices for the year. You can see that in 06, 07, boom, up in 2008, there's a price spike. The solid lines are the average power prices, annual power prices in 3 markets, 3 wholesale markets. One of them is your Zone A. Here we go. The New York ISO, that's kind of, I guess it's reddish. Well, I don't know. The brown one is PJM, which again is the region south of here, going from New Jersey out to Illinois, skipping over Indiana, which is in a different one. And then ISO New England, which is east of New York in New England. And you can see that as natural gas prices collapsed from 2008 to 2009, gas prices followed. Now, it's a complicated discussion as to why that is, but it does make sense that power prices in these regions. Now, you can see here from 2012 to 2013, gas prices have recovered some from roughly $2.50 per million BTU to somewhere between 3 and 4. And power prices have followed. They've gone up some. And at the end of my presentation, I'm going to talk about what happened this past winter with the polar vortex that I'm sure you all heard about on TV and felt in your bones.
Explain that terminology.
What?
What does it mean?
What, polar vortex?
Yeah, what is it?
Hold it. Wait till the end. I got a picture. I mentioned that not only did prices change when power prices changed, when the price of gas collapsed, but coal plants generated less and gas plants generated more. I like this example because, sorry about down here. Plant Daniel is a power plant in southeastern Mississippi. At that plant, there are 2 coal units and a large gas unit. The gas unit is the same size as the 2 coal units. You can see here that in 2008, the plant is still operating pretty well. It's starting from 2008, it operated really well. The percent measures something called a capacity factor. It's a measure of how much does a plant produce. It had a 70% capacity factor in 08. That's excellent. Boom. It had a below 60. This is the coal plant. And then as gas prices kept going down, its generation went down. The gas plant Well, it didn't operate a whole lot in 2008, maybe 38% capacity factor. And then as soon as gas prices went down, boom, it was over 60. And that, if we looked at any region of the country, this is what happened. Generally. Of course, there are some coal plants that are very cheap and they kept running them, or they're located in an area where you couldn't get gas or anything else in, so they kept running. But generally, this is what's happened. So you've got the coal industry, the coal plant owners faced with two facts. And again, I'm talking generally, but it's also true with Huntley. They're selling less and they're making less money on each piece they're selling. It's kind of like if you take your wool clothing business and move to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. You're going to sell less and you're not going to be able to sell what you do for as much as you would. My wife's a fiber artist, that's why I use that. That's what this measures. This shows a difference between the cost at which they can sell power and the cost of what it costs to generate the power. It's something called the dark spread for a coal plant. Don't worry about it. The key thing is that the spread was up in the range of $30, $45 back in 2007. This is for the Braden Point plant that Claire and I are familiar with in Massachusetts. By 2012, it was making negative money. It was basically costing them more to operate the plant than they could sell it for. And as a result, the new owners of the plant who bought it the sale closed early August of last year, and in late August, or maybe it was sometime within a month or so, they announced they're retiring it in 3 years. They have to give 3 years notice in New York State. I mean, in New England, sorry, forget that about New York State. Okay, another risk has been there hasn't been much growth in the demand for power. So you've got you've got the same amount of plants competing over selling to customers in the markets, not as much need. This is a peak demand. It's how much is used at the warmest part of the summer. And you can see that the peak demand from 2006 is roughly what it was in 2011. Now it's going to vary somewhat because of weather. But there's not been much growth. Yes?
Why is that?
Why is it? Well,
I mean, what changed that the peak demand in the summer didn't go up?
Well, I think three things happened. Three things happened. One is people became more conscious about conserving. Two is it's weather related. And three, the Great Recession hit in 2008. The key thing to me about this, though, is that it was starting to flatten before 2008. Now, I've done this kind of analysis for utilities around the country. For one in Virginia, the company said in 2012 our peak load was 20% higher than it had been in 2003. So it sounds like it got a lot of growth. And when you look at the year-by-year numbers, they had 20% growth between 2003 and 2006. After 2006, it flatlined. People conserve because there's much more knowledge about conserving. They want to keep their bills down. Temperatures do affect it, and then the economy.
How about efficiency of appliances and motors?
That's two. That's a great point. I forgot. You know, the national appliance standards went up. So people want energy efficient refrigerators, washing machines, the like. Good point. Thanks. This is peak demand. This is energy use. This is how much the total usage of people over the year. Again, it's flatlined. Of course, the economic recession affected that, but it's flatlined for a long time. Another factor that's affected the financial viability of coal is competition from renewables, wind and solar. I'll get into this some after lunch in the renewables panel, but you can see here, this line is the cumulative megawatts of solar photovoltaics installed in the U.S. It went up from a little over, in 2003, it was just a little below 100 megawatts to 12,000 in 2012. And the industry is continuing to boom.
That's capacity, that's not delivered, right?
Yeah, but it's,
So that's about 1.5 gigawatts delivered, right?
yeah.
So it's growing, but it's still.
Oh, it's still small. Renewables is still a small piece, but they're growing. This is wind. You can see this is, the numbers are how, boy, that's weird. Again, sorry about that. You can see it went from roughly 6,000 megawatts of wind capacity in the U.S. to 61,000 in 2013. And there's much more, as I'll talk about this afternoon, there's much more wind in the pipeline and solar in the pipe expected. So these are growing dramatically, not fast enough, but certainly they're growing dramatically. And in the portions of the nation that have competitive markets, they're really putting the hurt on coal. The nation's biggest wind market is Texas. Tremendous amount of wind down there and plans for a tremendous amount of more wind, additional wind. Kansas, Oklahoma, Iowa, South Dakota, areas that generally have a lot of coal plants and they're not operating as much because the wind's blowing and people are doing photovoltaics. Utilities and individual consumers. Capacity markets, the prices have been up and down. This is for PJM region. You can see this. If a merchant company like NRG can only sell power at a low rate, they make much less money. Coal prices have gone up over the last decade or so for a couple of reasons. The lower cost, the less expensive to produce reserves are being depleted. Quite simply. There is coal there. There's a debate over how much coal, but a fact of life is that the cheaper coal has been and is being used up. The price of coal will continue to go up. Also, the center for U.S. coal production has moved out west to the Powder River Basin in Wyoming. Transportation costs have gone up significantly. And finally, some plants use expensive international coal. A plant that Claire and I are familiar with, Bridgeport Harbor 3, buys coal from Indonesia. Because then it's very, very, very low sulfur. They don't have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to scrub it. Okay, yes?
Are we seeing a rise in coal prices also due to exports to China?
There's fear that it will be. I don't know that we've seen it spikes at times from exports. There's fear that exports of coal will lead to higher prices. But the Chinese are actually cutting back on their purchase of coal, international purchase of coal. And the U.S. competes in the world market with coal mined in Malaysia, Indonesia, and Australia. I mentioned before that coal profits dropped off the cliff. This is an example from the Brayton Point coal plant I mentioned about that's being retired, southeastern Massachusetts. In 2009, the owner of the plant at the time made, these are pre-tax, $345 million. Because of low gas prices, higher coal prices, and less generation, their pre-tax profits had dropped to $24 million in 2012. Quite a steep drop. Yes?
Why would you buy a losing coal plant and then shut it?
They bought it as part of a package of 3 coal plants. Dominion Resources wanted to sell it. So they packaged the 2 not good coal plants in the Midwest with Brayton Point. It's basically buy 2, get 1 free.
Does NRG own anything profitable?
I haven't looked at NRG's portfolio totally. But that's what's done in selling these assets that really aren't valuable. You package them with something that is valuable. So they got very little money for Brayton Point. And the new owners over 3 years will probably make some money, but they've decided to retire it. We did an analysis that shows these kind of prices, they never recover. Even in a very optimistic scenario, they never recover to 229 million or 345. They maybe get up to 30 or 40 million, and that's pre-tax. They pay some tax on that, and they've got other expenditures, paying interest on bonds, so that there's no way this plant ever becomes profitable again, unless, I mean, the coal industry's view, their view of the future is it's pretty dismal. We read the coal industry stuff, and it sounds like things we'd write, or that you'd read from somebody who's basically a manic depressive in the depressive state. Really, they're really depressed about things. So their hope for the future is that a lot of bad things happen to the other alternatives. Really, that's their hope. Their hope is solar's too expensive. Wind, you take away tax credits. Natural gas, there's not enough gas there, or the price goes up. Really, the only way coal survives in the long term, in their view, also there's no CO2 regulation. They continue to own Congress, which is probably not unrealistic. So really, their only hope for the future is a series of disasters for everybody else. Yeah.
Isn't there a concern that when they buy it, expecting to close it, they're going to have to pay to clean up the site?
Oh, absolutely. They need to remediate.
Did that factor in their?
I don't know. I didn't speak to the new owners, but they have to clean it up. Although I shouldn't say that. A lot of owners may try to run away from cleaning up. I mean, certainly it's not unheard of. I know, maybe when Claire speaks later, you can ask her. I'm sure they're pushing to make sure that they clean up.
If let's say they bought Brayton for $100 million or something like that. The energy company, they bought Huntley for around $100 million. If they made $345 million in a year, basically they made all their money back and then they doubled their profit. So this thing's an enormous cash cow until the price of gas collapses.
No, because they bought, Dominion Resources bought the plant in roughly 2002.
Right.
A group called the Conservation Law Foundation sued them over environmental emissions from the plant. And the company that owned it, Dominion, put in a $1.2 billion of environmental upgrades. They finished those environmental upgrades in 2012, okay? So they just put in over $1 billion and they sold it for $55 million. These guys, they may have made some money along the way, but at the end, they didn't make money.
Well, with NRG, they bought the Huntley plant for $100 million.
Right. I'm not gonna, I mean, you should ask, you can talk Huntley specific with Kathy.
So they made a lot of money and now they want to dump it because they're not making a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
It was a cash cow.
Welcome to American capitalism.
Oh, absolutely.
You make it sound like we should be surprised.
I'm surprised that actually some people are surprised that they ran it like a cash cow and now that it's done, it's kaput.
Yep. Okay, so this has happened all over the country. There's been some recovery. Recently, gas prices have gone up, coal plants have operated more. As Kathy will show you, we've redone the analysis, or she redid the analysis from our report, January report, and it doesn't change the conclusion. You don't need to read this, or you can, but basically it's all the circumstances I've talked about. They're not going away. Gas prices are likely to stay low, fairly low. Capacity market prices are likely to continue to swing. Little projected growth in demand for power, plus increased competition from solar, wind, and energy efficiency. Coal mining costs are likely to keep going up. There's a set of environmental requirements, rules that are either being rolled off by the EPA or that are coming soon that will affect the economics of coal plants, CO2 plants. CO2 costs will affect them at some point, and inevitable aging. And they're all coming. I mean, I can argue with the industry about how much, when, where, but they're all coming. This is a projection. These are called future prices. You can go on the internet now and you can buy natural gas for delivery in 2017 or 2020, and you know what you'd pay today for the future price. By the time you get to 2017, it might cost more, so buying it today for delivery in 2017 it would be a good idea. It may cost less, in which you can't spend too much. So they're called future prices. This is what the annual future prices are for natural gas. Going up from this year a bit, but still, if I had done this chart in 2008, the numbers would have, instead of going up to $6 per million BTU, it would have gone up to 14. Yeah.
You mentioned on the previous screen that the expected market prices will be fluctuating. You would think that the excess capacity would be more or less depressed for many years. What can you, in a brief statement, say why does it fluctuate so much? Why do prices fluctuate so much?
Well,
market prices?
the example I gave was for PJM back here. You've got a series of things going on. You've got new plants being built, which should lead to excess capacity and push prices down. At the same time, you've got the generators in PJM have pushed PJM, the system operator, to limit how much capacity can be bid into the market from outside. They don't want those bozos from Indiana or from Iowa bidding into their market. The more capacity that bids in, the lower the price. They've also limited how much energy efficiency can be bid into the market. Demand response. So the industry is trying to protect what it's got. That's why the numbers change depending on how much bids in and things like that. Yes, ma'am?
Also, I just wanted to make a statement that the New York State ISO changed the bidding procedure. Before, the bidding procedure was like this. We have a state utility, power authority. It's nonprofit. So the bidding procedure is like this. New York State needs 200 megawatts of power. Power authority says we'll give you 125 at 25 cents. National Grid is saying, okay, well, we'll give you the balance at maybe 50 cents. Before, they used to blend those rates. Today, the power authority, even though they bid at 25 cents, will get paid the highest bid, and all the utilities get paid now the highest rates. So the bidding procedures changed during that period also.
So I mentioned gas prices. They have futures prices you can buy today. For the power markets, the competitive wholesale market power, they're called forward prices. You can also buy them today if you were inclined. You can see they're pretty flat. Now this is on an annual basis. Okay? What I've done is I've annualized their future forward prices for each month. So if you looked on a monthly basis, this is what it looks like. Power prices go up, down, up, down. The peaks, the big peaks of the winter, this is what's the market projects for the future. Really high in January, February, going down, high again in the summer. Really, the high peaks you can start are the winter months, the secondary peaks are the summer months. But significant periods with low prices. Yeah.
What's the explanation for the thing going low every other month?
Well, it's not every month.
Seasons don't do that.
Yeah, they do. Seasons do that.
Yeah, but
power usage.
but February is more like January than it is like July.
This isn't 1 year. This is a series of years. This is the next.
Oh, those are years?
Yeah, these are years. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. These are a series of years. If I made the,
Okay, well, then why is
if
it
I made
doing
the
it every
text
other
down
year
here
then?
big enough, the lines are like tiny.
Why is it doing it every other year then?
It's not every other year. This is projected for next winter. Okay, then it goes down. This is projected for the summer.
Oh, okay,
This is the
so,
winter of 15.
okay, so each peak is a year.
Yeah,
Okay,
each
thank you.
peak. Well, the
All right.
difference between these peaks is a year, and between these peaks is a year. Okay, and when we do our analysis, we factor this in. But if you look at it on an annual basis, pretty flat.
Are you
Yeah.
gonna have a slide with, carbon tax? Graphic carbon taxes?
No.
Because I've been to several of these presentations, and they never include the cost of the carbon taxes in the analysis.
Well,
But for instance, like that Somerset plant in, up by Alcott, the chairman of AES said, I can afford the Barker school taxes, and I can afford the carbon taxes, but I can't afford both. So it's an issue that is never brought up in these presentations.
well, let's see, from 2005 to 2010, every year I projected what I thought Congress was going to do in terms of a carbon price. Okay? I thought there'd be a cap and trade system, and that this would be future market prices. I was wrong every single year. So I really, from my point of view, I can't tell what Congress is ever going to do on a price for coal. I hope they do something.
Well, I believe
But let me finish.
I believe these plants are paying carbon taxes to New
No,
York
they-
State.
Well, again, because New York's in Reggie. Yeah, they're in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, so they're paying $3 per megawatt hour for.
Okay, so that's 3 cents a kilowatt hour.
No,
Right.
that's
$3.
0.3 cents per.
0.3 cents, okay.
Yeah, it's really cheap. Yeah, it's 3 mil.
But it's due to go up.
Is that right? 3 mils, yeah.
It's
Two, it's only gonna go up,
right?
right now it's 2, it's gonna go up to 3, 3.5, 4. It's 0.3 to 0.3, it's really a small increase.
Right now.
Yeah, when the guy talks about he can't afford both, it cuts into his profit, but it's not a big, I mean, Reggie's good, gets money where it should go to do things that should be done, but it's not killing it. So the first reason I don't talk about CO2 taxes or prices is I was so wrong in the past. It is a real risk. But more importantly, we try to show that even if you don't consider CO2, these power plants are at severe financial risk. So really, you don't need CO2 to decide a plant should be retired. Okay, EPA, the evil EPA, and the war on coal. These are the rules that they're either that are likely to be changed in the near future. CASPER, cross-state air pollution rule, MATS, mercury and air toxic rules, the proposed regulation on CO2 emissions. There'll be some coal ash disposal rule, cooling water intake and emission rules, and then new ozone and SO2 standards sometime between now and 2017-18. They will have an effect on the cost of operating existing power plants. But you don't even need to consider that. Okay. Aaron talked about before that, what was it, ConAgra walked away overnight. The coal industry does the same thing. Kathy did a little bit of research for me and came back with a list of coal plants that were retired on fairly short notice. This is by no means is this meant to be exhaustive, okay? So they can, and at some point will likely walk away from Huntley without much notice. All right, you wanted the polar vortex. The reason why it's important here is that the coal industry has gone and said, wow, gas prices spiked in January and February. We need to keep operating these coal plants forever. And that's not a slam dunk. What happened is the polar vortex, the cold air spinning around the North Pole. Normally it stays up where it belongs in northern Canada and northern Russia. There have been a number of factors this year led it to come further south in the US and to go much further north in Europe and Russia. As a result, natural gas usage for home heating soared, as did its price, and power prices skyrocketed for portions of January and February, and much more power is generated from coal. Now the key question, this is these are drawings. On the left, I want to make sure I got it right. Yes, on the left is kind of a crude drawing of where the darker area is where the cold temperature normally sits during the winter. This is what happened this past winter. It got displaced to the north, actually not that much displacement there. It got severely displaced into the US and into the Atlantic. Now, is it related to climate change? I've seen some analyses that say yes. I've seen others that said no, it's just something that happens. So the key questions, was it caused or made worse by climate change? Unclear. Was it a one-time event or a sign of futures to come? No idea. Will natural gas prices and power prices spike as high in future winters? Remember, we've got this phenomenon in the market today. Looking ahead, is that going to happen? Unknown, but less likely as new natural gas transmission projects are completed. One of the reasons gas prices spiked in New England and in this area and the Midwest was there was gas, they just couldn't get it, enough of it to the places that wanted to use it. Can anything be done other than relying on more gas if we do face future polar vortexes? The answer is absolutely yes. More aggressive investments in economical renewable resources, wind and solar, geothermal where possible, and in energy efficiency, and encouragement of more demand response can lessen our dependence on all fossil fuels and reduce the likelihood of price spikes like those experienced this past winter. Yes?
Was a part of the impact of the polar vortex not just on the raw fuel, but on the capacity? Because I understand the NISO imposed charges on generators and on transmission.
Some generators couldn't operate because it was so cold. And some, I don't know whether pipelines didn't work. I know in the past in New England there have been problems with some of the pumps and the pipelines actually didn't work because it was so cold. We're doing an analysis for clients in Texas about a coal plant. And there's a lot of wind in Texas. And there are proposals for thousands of megawatts of new wind. There's a lot. And even if they export some of that wind to the southeast, there's still a lot of wind down there.
And they just put through a massive transmission line from north to southeast Texas, right? To Austin.
Did they?
Yes.
The transmission line? Yes.
Yeah, and that's mainly for wind.
Yep. Okay. My friend here.
It turns out there's a variation of what's called a merit order effect, and it allows both nuclear power and coal power plants to become extremely profitable as long as gas prices spike. And this is what allows gas and nuke owners to be extremely profitable, is when gas prices spike. And so this winter, gas prices kind of spiked because there was no gas left in reserve. And you've also got this effect where there's actually less and less gas being produced from fracking because it turns out those are such money losers, and ExxonMobil doesn't want to lose any more money in the gas business. So these are all trends that go on. But there's this term I use that's called a casino market. In New York, and a lot of the ISOs basically price electricity kind of like a rigged casino. And it's very, very difficult to predict, and there's all kinds of problems with being able to do renewables as long as the prices are unpredictable, and it's an important factor.
Okay, any other questions? Then we're going to move on to Kathy. One more.
I don't really have a question, I just have a statement as we go forward with the renewable sources. I was watching the news the other day, and I found that when the president was announcing the closure of the coal generating facilities, after that they had a blurb about Covanta coming in to be a renewable resources, a waste to energy facility. I wanted to warn you that Covanta has hooked up with VAC Industry, which does do wind and solar, and they produce and emit more greenhouse gases than coal burning facility. So when they tout themselves as renewable, they are not. There's a statement from our Attorney General Snyderman, who testified in the Public Service Commission hearing on whether or not Covanta was renewable energy. They were trying to go for a license in 2004 and 2010, and both times they were denied because of their emissions, not only of CO2, but sulfur dioxide and everything else. We do have a facility in Niagara Falls. They are planning on expanding, and they are spewing toxins. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. Be aware.
All right, well, thank you. We're going to let Kathy take over.
I'm Kathy Kunkel. I work with David at the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis. And I am here to talk specifically about the Huntley plant and how it kind of fits into that bigger picture that David just was explaining. So this is kind of an overview of some of what David already said about merchant power plants. And the Huntley plant is a merchant power plant. It's owned and operated by NRG, which is the largest owner of merchant power plants in the country. As David explained, merchant power plants are different from traditional power plants. Back in the late 90s, when many states decided to deregulate their electricity sector, before that, utilities owned power plants and were allowed to recover the costs of building, owning, and operating those plants from their customers through electric rates. When deregulation occurred and the electricity sector was restructured, power plants were spun off into separate generation companies that would no longer be regulated. And so those power plants that are owned by unregulated generation companies make their money by selling power into the wholesale market. And in New York, the New York Independent System Operator, New York ISO, manages that market. And so, as David explained, operating a merchant plant is riskier than operating a regulated plant because you don't have this guarantee that ratepayers will cover all of your costs. So a merchant plant in a deregulated market only operates when its cost of power, a merchant plant only operates when its cost of generating power is lower than the cost of power from the power plants that it's competing with, and its profits depend on how much it's selling and also on the spread between its cost of generating and how much it's able to sell that power for. So, looking to the future, a merchant plant owner is going to make a decision about retiring a power plant based on what it perceives to be the risk that that plant is not going to be able to recoup its operating costs from the market. So all of the factors that David discussed in a broad sort of national context apply to New York's deregulated electricity market. Natural gas prices, aside from the price spikes in the winter months, have been pretty low since 2008 and 2009. Demand has been weak and sales have been generally flat. And so what that means is, this is a graph of how much of New York's electricity has come from coal, and that, since 2008 has fallen down dramatically. And this is a graph of recent annual average New York market prices. The red line is the on-peak hours, so that's like, basically during the day, and the off-peak is sort of like at night and on the weekends, and then the green line is just the average. But the point is that they've all fallen off since 2008, 2009. So our analysis that we did of the Huntley plant and the prospects for the Huntley plant is grounded in the recent performance of the plant. And over the past several years, Huntley's financial performance has taken a turn for the worse. So what this graph shows here is basically the fraction of time that the Huntley units have been operating. So for the past few years, Huntley's operation has gone down, either because the cost of other plants that it's competing with has gone down, or Huntley's costs have gone up. And in fact, what we saw when we dove into this in more detail is that both of those things have happened. Huntley's costs went up, and the cost of power from competing plants went down. This is the cost of coal delivered to the Huntley plant. Coal costs in 2013 were about 30% higher than they were in 2005. And coal costs are a major part of the overall cost of running and operating Huntley. And here, so, hold on. Yes, sorry. So Huntley's earnings have gone down pretty dramatically, and this is a result of wholesale market prices having gone down and Huntley's costs having gone up at the same time, basically. So we've seen that basically, from 2005 to 2008, the Huntley plant was earning, pre-tax earnings were something in the order of $60 to $80 million a year, and then for the past 4 or 5 years, they've been, well less than $10 million a year. Yeah.
Quick question. By any chance did they change owners in 2008, 2009? Why the precipitous drop?
Not that I'm aware of. No, this is all market forces. So this is all, this basically represents the price that they're able to get from their power. So the price that they're able to get for their power fell dramatically between 2008 and 2009, and at the same time, the price of coal was increasing over those years. So it was more expensive for them to generate the power, and they couldn't sell it at as high a price as they were used to. And that had a pretty dramatic effect on their earnings for the plant. So now I want to get into a little bit more detail about what happened this past winter, because the polar vortex was very dramatic, not just in terms of living through it, but also in the utility world. And it brought to light some problems about natural gas and gas transmission and gas availability that had not been obvious before. And so, this is the past, 2007 to 2014 monthly power prices in New York. And you can see that this past winter, prices were extremely high in New York, Western New York. And there were several factors that drove wholesale markets to be this high. And this is not just a Western New York thing. This was most of the deregulated markets in the Northeast and the Midwest had extremely high price spikes for a couple months this past winter. And so there were several factors that drove that. The first is that demand for electricity hit record high in January, just because people were, using their heating systems and using a lot more electricity because it was so cold. Secondly, a lot of power plants that were traditionally able to run, including like coal and nuclear plants, had higher than normal levels of outages because it was so cold that it created mechanical problems in some power plants. So, and then of course natural gas prices were also hit historic highs because, as David said, it was usually mainly due to constraints in delivering the gas to where it needed to go. So those three things, the extremely high demand for electricity, the unexpected outages of traditional plants, including nuclear and coal plants, and then very high gas prices, drove spot prices to be extraordinarily high. This polar vortex revealed some things that were not apparent before in the previous sort of mild winters. And as a result of this event, Huntley ran a lot more frequently in the first quarter of 2014 because it was very profitable for it to run, much more so than it had been in the past. So Huntley, this is the graph of how Huntley has been operating. In the first 3 months of 2014, Huntley was back up to running at about 60%, and has since fallen off again after this winter. But we wanted to, we wanted to take this into account because, obviously this is sort of a new factor that we weren't thinking about back when we wrote this report last fall. I think it's unlikely that 2014's event will be repeated in the near future because it is a very unusual weather phenomenon that happened, and the extremely cold temperatures are what drove a lot of the problems, contributing to the record high demand for electricity and gas. And I think, especially given the era of climate change that we're in, I think it's unlikely that the next several years we'll see this recur. Yeah.
I don't know anything about markets, but was there any problems with just plain speculation on those prices? People.
I mean, I don't know for sure, but the way that electricity markets work, I'd say almost certainly yes. But yes, but then so in the next several years are what are really important for looking at, whether for NRG in terms of whether or not they're looking to retire a coal plant like Huntley that's been pretty marginal for the last several years. So we updated our analysis of Huntley over the past couple of weeks to take into account the possibility of significantly higher wholesale electricity prices in winter months going forward. And this is sort of the new data that we've been using, which so this reflects expectations of very high winter price spikes in the future, and this is our updated expectation of future earnings from the plant. And again, you see that it's doing better than we originally thought it might, but still, we're talking 10 years ago, this plant was making $60 to $80 million a year, and now we're saying probably under 10 million for the remainder of the decade. And we also did not include several other factors that are probably relevant for this analysis. One is just increasing costs of operating Huntley. This is not by any means a new power plant. These units are approaching 60 years old, and most of the coal units that are retiring in the next several years are around that age. And because of that, there's a lot of uncertainty about the cost of operating a power plant beyond 60 years old. But there's a general expectation that the cost of operating an older plant and maintenance costs on a plant like that go up over time. And that's something that we did not include in this analysis. We also did not include any expectation of carbon emissions from, for example, the EPA's newly released regulations on carbon emissions from existing power plants, which, frankly, I doubt are going to go into effect before 2020 anyway, which is why we didn't include them. So basically, in conclusion, like many coal-fired power plants in deregulated markets, Huntley has been impacted by low natural gas prices, stagnant demand, rising coal prices, and increasing energy efficiency in renewables. The risk that Huntley may retire in the near future is based on the expected future earnings of the plant versus the expected expense of continuing to operate the plant. And despite the recent winter price spike and the changes that has caused in terms of people's expectations of where market prices are likely to go, it doesn't really change our fundamental conclusion, which is that their Huntley units do appear to be risky for retirement. And as David mentioned, this is something that could occur without a lot of advance notice to the community. So that's it.